right, from our 144.1 Facebook forum question of the week. The question was, why the importance on keeping the traps backing down and avoiding excessive amount of elevation. So one of the things that you find when you're looking at protecting the shoulder girdle, which obviously shoulder girdle incorporates into spinal stability, which allows the strong hips to be able to transfer force. So if you look at the mechanisms of an injury, the things you want to avoid. Number one is elevation of the shoulder girdle. So if we shrug really, really high from that position, that would be our red flag number one. So if the shoulder blades are held excessively high and not in a neutral position, which the opposite of elevation would be depression. So if you want to try to drop those shoulder blades back and down. Now number two is, the second portion of that would be any type of protraction. So if you see an excessive amount of distance between the shoulder blades, so if you find that medial border of a shoulder blade, medial border of a shoulder blade, if this distance is too far, too great, normally you look at that width of the hand. So if there is a width of the hand difference of a natural anatomical position of her just standing there, we also red flag that as well. The opposite of that would be a retracted shoulder blade, where she's developing the wrinkles between those shoulder blades in that sports bra or in that shirt or whatever the athlete is wearing. And number three is if the shoulders start to anteriorly tilt, which means there's always a significant difference between what a excessively anterior rotated shoulder blade versus an anatomical position. Now they're always slightly rotated forward, but we want to avoid an excessive amount. So the shoulder blades normally articulate around the spinal column, around this shoulder girdle. The scapulas will move in that plane, or they'll move in this plane. Anytime that they excessively start to pitch forward, that is our third red flag, and that's where you run into a lot of problems. There's a lot of musculature and connective tissue and supporting structures that allow the head of the humerus to sit directly in that ball and socket joint. So we've got bony protuberances come over top that settle, and then this should sit right in top, right inside of that. If it happens to sit inside of that, that becomes a very stable shoulder. Now the problem is, the question comes back to what happens when you have an excessive amount of scapular elevation. So if it shrugs, well, all of this musculature will pull the head of the humerus slightly out. Remember, it rolls in, and it actually should set back inside of this socket. So if there's an excessive amount of elevation, it'll actually pull the head of the humerus and start to drift it outside of that socket. Now if you combine all three of those, where we have a elevated shoulder girdle, so go ahead and lift these shoulders up, very good. If they are protracted, which they're naturally starting to pop out and up, and then if they start to anteriorly rotate, then you have a head of the humerus that is starting to sit very, very front loaded in terms of where it sits in this ball and socket joint. Now, the biggest problem you run into are a naturally elongated stretch of that rotator cuff, as well as the labrum, the little fat, the little connective tissue that should sit and hold a ball and socket right in there. But now all of a sudden, if you start rolling it forward, it'll start to tear. Any type of movement that occurs will start to tear that labrum. So from this position, if we're doing our Job's exercises, standard Job's exercises, elbows are tucked into the rib cage. We want to go ahead and retract that shoulder blade. We want to try to keep this soft and pliable. Go ahead and externally rotate, smooth, and protect that there. Now, you can hold for X amount of time, whether that's 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, progressively work up from there. But she wants to hold and maintain that as she slowly starts to externally rotate. So we want to protect the position of these shoulder blades. As that hand starts to roll back in, the head of the humerus starts to roll forward, the entire humerus starts to spin in, and then it spins out, then it spins in, then it spins out. The athlete's instructed to keep these nice and tight. Now go ahead and roll that up into a high position. Now, out of the 90 degree, it becomes very, very difficult from here, because obviously anytime you start to raise those hands towards that collarbone height, it becomes very difficult to do so without elevating the traps. But the same exact principle applies. Keep these shoulder blades together and just externally rotate, and then slowly bring it forward. Externally rotate, and then slowly bring it forward. The whole time the athlete is instructed to stay soft and pliable here. This is a very difficult thing for a lot of people, because the majority of people will hold their tension and their stress, their psychomotor stress, right up through here. So anytime things become very difficult, if they're holding excessively or starts to burn or become very uncomfortable, they want to start squeezing these traps up and back, and it becomes a very, very difficult thing whenever it starts to lift up. So the athlete is always instructed to hold this. Now check your traps, lift them up, and then try to push down on them, and then remember where they're placed, because that's where we want that to stay. And relax. Now from this position, we have an option of moving. They can go to a just pure protraction or retraction. That would be straight arms. We're just going to hug the world, hug yourself. So open that up and then draw it back in. You can take the rotator cuff out of it slightly and just allow the athlete to feel that tension and activate right between the shoulder blades. If you can see that, if I move remain, from there we're going to pinch and let them pull apart. Pinch and let them pull apart. Now from there we also have a ShG spinning hyper, which is from here we're going to grab a reverse handshake grip. So opposite, very good. Now if you guys can see, that's what we call a reverse handshake grip, where the origin is coming from the pinky and the distal end is thumb side. Now from there the athlete is instructed to only rotate that humerus back. So this is actually an external rotation and a, go ahead, extension back. Very good. Now as they do that, now they're instructed to go ahead and bring it back forward to wrap around. So it's going to wrap right around the other really cool band that's around her wrist. So we're going to draw that back, and the athlete's instructed to go broad chest, tall, pretty posture, and then roll that back in. Now oftentimes the tendency is to pull from the low back, so we're going to take the top of the head and go up, and think about the vertical column that she's standing next to, or that this is connected to, is the exact same as her spine, and she's going to feel those shoulder blades wrap around her spine and then wrap around to the front, so that you get full range of motion of protraction, retraction, protraction, and retraction. And the very last one, she can let go of these. She's going to sit on a bench. We're going to give her a pair of 2.5s. And from this position, she's going to put her knee on. Now, all of these are standard Job's exercise. What we're looking for is scapular rotation. So she's going to kneel. She's got a vertical column that is parallel with the bench. Now from this position, she's going to go full cans. We normally set an off leg because we want to help take some of the tension off of this low back. So she should be long and vertical. Top of the head should be extending out, parallel to the bench, and we're just going to flag somebody down for help. Exact same position. We're challenging the athlete's ability not only to be stable and have some good articulation of this shoulder blade, but also to stay off of the upper traps. We want to try to lift this up according to our ability to stay off your upper traps. So all of this is just a way to challenge our athlete to not only stabilize the shoulder girdle, but to pull from the middle to low traps so that they keep that sternal line up. If that happens, then whenever they set up in a good platform, such as a squat with the bar on their back, or a front squat in that catch position or that receive position, we're going to give our athlete a significantly greater opportunity to be successful. Now we also have an internally rotated humerus. Now this becomes very difficult. Go ahead and hold this position. Now if you come around to the front, and you guys will see, the more that we internally rotate, so spin that in, spin it in, more, you'll notice we've got an anteriorly rotated humerus at our scap. From this position, it becomes very difficult, so we want to counter torque that sternum back up, and then go ahead and do some reps and let them fall. Same principle applies. We want to try to keep these traps back and down, and you want to be able to do that without elevating these shoulder blades. Now, same exact principle. Go ahead and bring them up and hold, and you'll see a roll it in, more, turn the elbows up, turn the elbows up, turn the elbows up, turn the elbows up. It'll actually become kind of painful for some athletes. Once you hold this position, the athlete is instructed to wring out a wet towel and counter torque your sternum back up. Big broad chest, big broad chest, big broad chest, and then do your reps from there. Staying soft and pliable, you can walk around, put your fingers right on their traps, and the athlete is instructed to feel the least amount of tension through here as possible. Alright, one of the corrective exercises that we're going to do, notice the parallel grip. We want to try to keep this as safe for the athlete as possible. But one of the things that you learn as a coach, if you create a safe environment where the athlete feels like they're in a good learning environment, you create a better psychomotor connection, which means from here, we take the top of the head and go vertical. The athlete is instructed, we just have meat hooks. We're going to hold on super tight, but we're going to relax the elbows, and we're just going to do a reverse shrug. So from here, here's a passive shrug. And we're going to develop the musculature that's going to pull the top of her head up, just pinching the shoulder blades together and then pulling those down. As the athlete goes through, you want to watch, make sure the sternum stays vertical So we've got a good sternal line, making sure the chest stays up, and make sure that they're not pulling from the hip flexor. Oftentimes athletes will start to pitch their head back, or they'll kick their legs forward. It's because they're starting to pull from that iliopsoas. And relax. Now from this position, exact same exercise. The only difference is this is out of a dip position. It's pretty safe, pretty stable. A lot of athletes feel like they can stay up here a little bit longer. The top of the head goes vertical. We've got a locked elbow, locked tricep, and all we're trying to do is just the exact same thing. We have a passive elevation of the shoulder blades in this passive shrug position. We want to use your natural body weight to work in the opposite. Develop the musculature that's going to pull your traps back and down, including your serratus anterior on the very front portion of that. Now, to finish out, in review and conclusion, all of that is a great anatomy lesson, all of that is a great physiology lesson, but what does that really mean to performance? In the end, number one, a reduction in injuries. The athlete really, it really isn't that important if the athlete gets super strong and fast and powerful if they're number one injured. So above all else, we want to try to prevent. If you're pushing and hammering as hard as you possibly can, there's going to be a lot of problems, and we want to make sure that the kinematics, the kinetics of that injury are correct, where the biomechanics are allowing for a proper functioning body. Now, what that means is less force bleed. It means we can apply more power, more force. A more stable joint allows the athlete to be able to utilize all the strength and the power that they develop, which means from a stable shoulder girdle, that allows us to put a heavier, stable bar on our back. So for instance, if we follow from a backward standpoint, that means it allows us to do more pulls, more vertical pulls, more horizontal pulls. It allows us to do all the different types of musculature that's going to create a very strong, stable shoulder girdle. Now, a strong, stable shoulder girdle means it allows us better mechanics to keep our posture up, which if you've noticed, somebody has poor shoulder stability, that normally is accompanied with poor spinal stability. Now, if the spine becomes significantly more stable, that means we can put a big, heavy bar on your back, which allows you to be significantly more successful. Most lifts are most lifts occur because an athlete, not because they're not strong enough, but because there's a kink in the arm or there's a kink in the chain that doesn't allow them to transfer force correctly. Prior to that, normally you'll find if you watch a lot of lifts that go awry, it's because that sternum drops, that chest drops, or because they're not strong enough in the mid to low back. It's not because their legs and their hips aren't strong enough. So if we can allow the athlete to develop a good foundation for success, that would mean that the spine stays up nice and tall and rigid and allows a better transfer of force. Now carry that even farther, that should allow the athlete to be able to do stronger Olympic lifts. It should allow the athlete to do better plyometrics, which all of that, when you put it together and package it into a good comprehensive program, means the athlete becomes significantly faster and significantly stronger, and the application of that becomes a better athlete.